We can go ahead and get started. It looks like there's a good number of people in here. So today we are going to do an event services roundtable. My name is Katy Morgan. I'm the coordinator for facility operations at the University of Florida.
Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm Nick Rodriguez, and I am the Assistant Director of Campus Recreation at San Francisco State University.
So before we get started, if you guys just want to go ahead and use the chat box and type in your university, what area you work in.
Yeah, we'd love to know who all is here and who's represented. I'm sure we've got people from all over. So we'll use the chat function again in a bit. So just to warm us up, let's see who all is here.
You can also put your user or your university in your name if you want to. I see some of you already have.
I see the East Coast, West Coast, mountains.
Exciting.
All right, well, welcome again. We're really excited. I don't know what we anticipated in terms of how many, but it looks like we've got over 100 of you all here with us. So we are very excited to talk about event services and provide this space. But before we do that, I think Katie's going to cover just some ground rules, just because there are a lot of us and we are using Zoom, which I feel like by now many of us are pretty comfortable with, given how much we've probably been using it. But just to cover those bases.
Yeah. So just start off, the session is going to be recorded and posted on the NIRSA website. If you've attended some in the past, the chat box will also be posted there. So if you want to go back and watch it, that'll all be there. If you can make sure that you're muted, when you came in, you were automatically muted, but just keeping that on mute, or unless you're talking, then make sure that you unmute so that we can hear you. And then we're going to be utilizing the chat box for any questions or anything that you guys want to talk about. So we'll get into that in a second, but using that chat box will be super helpful.
Awesome. So given that this is a roundtable, although we might have some content in our back pocket to kick us off with conversation, we want to make sure that you get to talk about what you came here to hear and talk about. So we want to open up the floor for you all via the chat box to propose and submit some questions or topics. Several have done that prior to the meeting, but with those who are here, we want to know what you want to cover and talk about in the roundtable, and we will be here to help facilitate that. So if you wouldn't mind just, again, shifting focus to the chat box and just throw in any questions, discussion topics that you want to hopefully discuss today with your colleagues from all over. And I'm going to, behind the scenes, kind of jot those down into a list, and then we'll pull that list up next and use that as kind of an agenda for our time today in the roundtable.
these are really good.
Keep up. Keep them coming. Also, even though we are currently, all of us, I think the main focus of our days is how we're responding to and accommodating our operations around COVID-19. But keep in mind too, now might be a good time to rethink policies and procedures and protocols related to hosting special events when things get back to normal as well. So we can certainly create space to talk about COVID-19 accommodations, but also, when things are back to normal, are there things about your event services that you would have loved to discuss, even if COVID-19 wasn't a thing? Maybe how we intake reservation requests, or what technology we're using to manage requests and plan for events with our user groups. All of that is fair game too. It doesn't have to be tailored to COVID-19.
It'll take about 30 more seconds to compile some. Think you're good to go?
1 minute, I'm typing them all on. It'll be like 3 seconds. But yeah, it looks like the ideas are slowing down, so that's perfect.
While he compiles those, we really appreciate you guys all being here. We were talking about how event services is always falling into the facility operations, but kind of doesn't get that special attention all the time. So really excited to talk with you all on this topic and hear what your universities are doing.
You're ready.
You ready? All righty. All right, well, we want to dive into the first one that is on their student staffing models. If anyone is interested in talking about that.
Yeah, there were a lot of comments around staffing. Maybe it was specific to COVID-19, but what does the staffing structure look like? Let's maybe hear typically during, again, normal or without COVID-19 operations, what does your student staffing model look like? Do you have student supervisors at every event? Are they staffed with students based on attendance or based on the nature of the event? What does that look like? And how is that maybe shifting because of COVID-19? And anyone is free to jump in.
I can talk a little bit about what UNC Greensboro does. We have staff that are specific to special events, so it's our program area. And we have 20 student staff. We have supervisors and assistants. And they run setup and breakdown for all of our events. They'll supervise the event if it's large enough. So typically if it's 50 people and it's a high activity event, or if it's 100 people, but it's more of a seated like banquet kind of thing, we'll have a supervisor there. And then obviously additional if it's like 500 people. And then we'll also have them run check-in to assist with facilities staff if the event is really large and we have a lot of community participants who don't just have a student ID that they can swipe to get in, and things like that. However, for the fall semester, I don't know how many large events we'll have. So we've kind of talked about potentially having them just working with facilities staff to run counts for different spaces to make sure that they're staying under whatever the requirements are for those spaces, since we don't know what that will look like. But we're still trying to kind of figure out what their position that they've been trained for will look like in the fall.
With the like amount of special events that are like, some weekends maybe there's 12 in one weekend, some weekends there's maybe one. How do you make sure that the staff is getting the hours that they want?
So our staff are pretty used to having a very flexible schedule. We do kind of a snake draft style schedule. So we have meetings every 2 weeks, and we pass around the schedules for the supervisors and the schedules for the assistants. And it goes from one end to the other, and then it goes back through. And they rotate through every week who's first. So they kind of choose their own schedule. So if somebody has a really busy week at school, they might pick less shifts, but they're used to, we have career fair is a really big event for us. Our new student convocation is a really big event. So they know kind of when the big ones are, and that there will also be weeks where we only have a couple things going on.
Hey y'all, I'm Ross Rodriguez. I'm at the University of Texas at Austin, and our special events are set up in a way, we oversee 8 facilities, and each one of our staff members, our entry-level staff members, we call them activity supervisors, they're all included in a special events all melting pot. So they are hired as their specific facility activity supervisor, as well as a special events all melting pot. And then our leadership team, our building coordinators, a select few of them are designated as special event coordinators. And so our model is if it's a smaller event that is at a specific facility, it's usually handled by that facility's main staff. And then if additional staff is needed, then it goes into that melting pot. And then for larger scale events, things like convocations, or some of our facilities host volleyball matches for our varsity volleyball program. Those go into like a special events all kind of melting pot, and we pull help from wherever, depending on when the setup will take place, and then throughout the coverage of the event and the strike as well.
Awesome, thank you. And it sounds like we just heard from 2 different types of staffing models. And Jeremy asked in the chat from KU, is a dedicated special events staff the norm, or maybe not the norm, but is that common? And I know that that's definitely a conversation that I've had in different teams as well. So would love to hear from others about that. Do you have a dedicated special events staff? And if you do, was that always the case? And what kind of necessitated, and what was your experience creating that dedicated special events team? Because it does come with its own challenges. Or if you don't have a dedicated special events team, how does that work for you?
Hey, this is Ashley Miller with the University of Minnesota. We're actually in a unique position where we currently have a special events team that is typically made up of students who also work in the department, but just wanted some additional hours that we would staff specifically for events. However, we recently, within the last couple of months pre-COVID, came up with a new student staffing structure. So we were actually planning on transitioning our student staff to not have student special event staff specifically starting this summer, which this is all kind of getting thrown. I don't know, we'll figure out how we want to do that transition now with all this other stuff going on. But we're looking to just pull from our student staff that are on the floors in the facility. They're going to set up events. We'll have our building managers check in with the events. So we're actually moving away from those dedicated event staff just because it was really difficult our events were so sporadic that it was hard for them to guarantee hours, for our manager of those students to even check in, build good relationships with them, just because it was so hit or miss. So we're kind of transitioning during this weird time, which I think will be to our benefit in the end, but we'll just have our students really checking in with events and kind of monitoring them as they're moving about the facility.
Thank you, Ashley. That's really interesting. We're kind of doing the opposite at University of Florida, so it's interesting to hear that you're taking away the special staff, and we're looking to gain one. So that's really insightful. Thank you.
Yeah, and in
I
the
think
chat, several others have chimed in talking about how they might not have a specific dedicated team, but it sounds like a lot of different institutions train their student groups that already work within the department and train them to be able to staff those special events so that they can pick up those extra shifts, but still work in their home department or base program area within their department. So that allows a lot of flexibility, allows them to have consistent, but also extra hours. So that's great. Thank you all for chiming in on that. Because yeah, special events can be variable. Like Katie said earlier, sometimes we've got those busy seasons where we've got dozens of events on a weekend, but other times of the year there aren't as many. So how could we keep a specific staff working and provided with hours? So great stuff there. Awesome. So any other talking points on that anyone wants to jump in or either add or ask or share specific to student staffing models with special events? Okay. So it looks like our next talking point is priority. So and this could be a relevant conversation either with COVID-19 or beyond, even in I keep saying normal times, for lack of a better phrase, but how do we prioritize allocation of space through our reservation processes for student groups versus maybe university departments versus community groups or any other group types that we might have? How does that look for different folks?
So I can talk more from UNC Greensboro. So we have, I'm in the Department of Recreation and Wellness, I guess I should say. So we're student fee funded. We don't really say like, oh, we don't take any external group reservations that aren't affiliated with the university. We still accept all of those. But we do give some priority to large university events. Whether it is a student group, we have one that is a very large event for the community and for the university. So it's our annual powwow. But we have things like new student convocation. We have a graduation ceremony. We have some different things that we put in like a year in advance, whereas everyone else just gets access to it the semester before. So we kind of regulate it that way, but also being a recreation facility, we're not a full event facility. So we have to we can't take all of our courts offline for events at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday because we'll have riots. So we have to we always make sure that we have some court space available and some studio space available for our group exercise classes. And so we look at it more from a programming standpoint than what groups we allow or not allow in the facility. But the pricing structure is definitely different for a non-university group versus a university group.
Ross, could you touch on the 3 reservations per semester?
Yeah, so at the University of Texas, we have a hierarchy as far as our scheduling goes with recreational sports facilities. So first and foremost is always academics, and we try to schedule their classes in when they request them. Secondly, then would come rec sports programs. Third would be athletics in our facilities. And then fourth would be other departments and student organizations. And that's when you start getting into like other departments will pay similar to what Hannah had indicated at UNC. But our student organizations, I think the University of Texas has something like, I don't know, I want to say the neighborhood of like 4,600 registered student organizations. That could be way off. That could be actually less than what we have with the 52,000 student campus. But our philosophy has been that each student organization gets 3 reservations per semester. And those reservations are free and include all of the equipment and amenities that we have in the space if they're approved to use them. And then let's say that an organization has requested the use of a facility for a 4th time, but then another student organization is making their first reservation, then that first reservation organization gets priority over the person trying to use it the 4th time.
Are there any institutions that would say that because they need the fund, like if their student organizations are free, but they need the funding from a community group that pays, would you say that that comes into your thought process when agreeing to choose a free student org or a paid community event?
So for us at Texas, our priority is our campus community, and so student organizations would take priority over that. Now, when you get down to like the other departments and student organizations level, like that fourth tier, it's kind of a first come first serve reservation basis. Um, but if it came down to a student organization where their access or their reservation is free versus a non-affiliated campus or non-affiliated community group, first of all, there's a lot of hoops that that community group would need to jump through. They need to get an on-campus sponsor to have them in one of our facilities. They can't just make an outside reservation.
Awesome, thank you. And there's a couple of other notes in the chat from different institutions. It seems like a lot of, or most have a designated priority list that maybe they even list on their website, kind of being transparent about the priority structure or hierarchy. And then there was also the point of where different priorities might be because of different reasons. For example, a department that's fee funded. So Jeremy from KU mentioned that since rec services is fee funded, students will almost always take priority. And that makes a lot of sense. And then others have mentioned being first come, first serve, and then having some specific requirements with external groups, particularly around providing insurance. That's great. As COVID-19 continues to play a role in how we think about reopening, I remember one of the specific questions when we were at the beginning was, how will our priority structure change as we maybe operate in a limited capacity, whether it's with limited spaces online, with limited staff available to operate events, whatever limitation that might be. How are our priority structures changing, if at all, in the midst of COVID-19? And maybe they're not.
Has anyone thought about this in relation to event services?
There's been a lot of discussion on it, but I think with, I guess there are multiple scenarios that I know the university is looking at where it's completely virtual events. It's okay, you can have 100 people in a room. It's you can have 10 people in a room. And so I think we're kind of trying to sift through what different events look like at different layers. So if it's completely online, what that looks like. So we've been working on that now with potential for maybe some outdoor programming that's in person, but we still stream it online for people who aren't in the area because they've gone to their hometown. And so we're looking at some different options like that. But I think also students are being pretty bombarded with social media stuff right now too. So some challenges.
Yeah, great points. The digital space has definitely ramped up, I feel like, in terms of what our students are getting to see and being offered through our different programs virtually. Others mentioned, so Ross mentioned that priorities won't really change, but the opportunity to even have events might be delayed as we, there might be other priorities department-wide in terms of just reopening in the first place and providing space for students to have open recreation and exercise and enjoy other programs that we offer. So that's a good point too, is where does special events and event services fall in that departmental priority? Has anyone experienced challenges or have any interest in discussing that? And, should this be a priority to rush back to taking in reservations, scheduling spaces, or does it make more sense to put that kind of on hold as we figure out how to even reopen? Cool. No problem. Okay. Katie?
Yeah. I know at UF we haven't fully thought about, where it falls into the department. So definitely something that we're hoping that other people had thought about, but completely understandable, if you haven't. But yeah, we can move on to our next topic. So I know we briefly talked digital events, but is anyone else, hosting any digital events?
Virtual fitness classes, Dwayne mentioned from Elizabeth City State University. And Melanie mentioned that right now we've attempted some virtual events with low attendance for events after 5 p.m. and better luck with recorded content.
This is Dustin from Arizona State University. I would be curious to know about other virtual technologies that are being utilized, not just the fact that we are hosting virtual events, because I think we all are trying to reach out in different modalities there, but I'm more curious to know what different softwares are being used successfully in a variety of different ways as we continue to look to program or supplement some of our in-person events with virtual offerings to keep capacities and experiences high.
Great question. And some are chiming in on the chat. So Zoom, YouTube, and Instagram Live for virtual group fitness classes. And Jackie Towers also mentioned hosting their athletics banquet via Instagram. That's cool. Discord, Cynthia Lally mentioned using Discord to connect students. And I know Discord is being used a lot too for those that have esports leagues as a mode of communication there as well. Yeah, lots of Instagram. Aaron Brooks talked about Instagram fitness classes and a virtual scavenger hunt. Aaron, not to put you on the spot, but would you mind sharing more about that? That sounds cool.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Brooks. I'm the manager of intramural sports at the University of Akron in Akron, Ohio. One of the things that we've tried doing multiple things of like a trick shot, or we stole an idea from somebody about like a best movie bracket in, we've tried all kinds of different things with very little input. It kind of seems as though students are sick and tired of being in front of their computer screens or their phones or whatever it have you. So one of the things that we came up with was an outdoor scavenger hunt. And everything is themed to be centric around the University of Akron and the city of Akron. However, there are different adaptations that we've created to make it that they can do it on their own. So in Akron, we have the Cuyahoga Valley National Park System, which is a huge, incredible, beautiful park system that's here in Akron. But one of the things is that take a picture in front of one of the signs in front of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. However, if you live in, Boston, if there's a national park or a park that you want to go hiking in, as long as you take a picture in front of that park sign, that counts. So we've got a restaurant that is well known for their grilled cheese sandwiches. So we gave them the option to, create their own grilled cheese and send us a picture of it. So just different things that are Akron centric that they can do from wherever. A last example I'll give is we have the Akron Rubber Ducks, which is a AA minor league baseball team. So, one of the things we came up with was have a picture of a rubber duck in a body of water that's outside. Like, we don't care where it is. It could be a puddle, right? But just something outside. So everything with the exception of two ideas is to get them outside, to get them on walks, to get them, just to be outdoors and outside of, really to get them away from a computer.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I saw in there a virtual 5K. That's something that we just finished up at UF, and it was pretty successful and really exciting to get to connect with people and have that 5K be run from all different spots in Florida and even other states. So that was really cool.
Yeah, Amanda Christensen mentioned using a program or maybe an app or software called Challenge Runner to host a fitness challenge. So that could be a new technology, and it integrates with devices and apps. So maybe if someone already uses a running app, if it integrates, then that can help track towards that fitness challenge. So thank you for that suggestion, Amanda. Netflix watch parties was mentioned by Easton Henriksen. I know a lot of folks have been doing that, especially with their student staffs, because I haven't done it. So if anyone has and has success with that, feel free to chime in. But I think it's a plugin with Google Chrome where you can stream Netflix together and chat as if you're watching it in person together. Yep, student awards and banquets keeps coming up. Looks like we've used Facebook Live and different platforms for that. Outdoor virtual local trips around Boca from Devetta at FAU, posting those on Instagram. Awesome. Microsoft Teams, definitely a big thing. So Melanie mentioned that their campus moved to Teams and has had success using that for live events, and then IGTV for recorded content. Great. Ashley Marsh mentioned the Goose Chase app for scavenger hunts. That's another one that I've heard of, but never actually used. Definitely heard about that a few times. So if you're looking into a scavenger hunt, that might be worth exploring. Matt Clare mentioned that their bike shop is using Strava to do cycling challenges each month. And then a few others have mentioned doing a 5K, virtual 5K, which is great. Cool.
Awesome. That chat will be posted, so if you want to go back and look at some of those things that people were talking about or said that they were using, it'll be up there so you can see all those. Next topic is the reopening plan, mostly pertaining to, events and event services, and what kind of plan that's going to look like. With our events only going to be allowed to have 10 people, or is it just no events at all, or if anyone has thought into that. I know for University of Florida, we're still taking requests for the fall semester. No one's really submitted any for summer, but taking them for the fall and just kind of letting them know that things are up in the air. We'll put you down on our calendar so your space is reserved, but everything could change depending on what happens this fall. So Ross said won't be holding any events in person. Is there a date that will be that fall?
No, we don't have a date yet. Ours is, our phased approach will be based on a couple different criteria: demand, staffing, PPE, chain of supply, that kind of stuff. And so for now, phase one's not going to have any special events or programming. And then as we get into phase 2 or 1.5 or 2 and beyond, then we'll start rolling things in.
I know SEC created a rule that no summer camps for their AAU groups would be allowed until August, I believe.
A few others have chimed in. Some have specific dates that are being set by potentially their institution, or they can't have any events before then. A lot of things are certainly up in the air, which I'm at San Francisco State, and that's definitely the case for the CSU system. I think we're anticipating learning about the fate of fall for at least student classes, whether those are in person or virtual, which I think will impact a lot of how we navigate or make decisions on our operations, including special events, but also just opening our facilities and when and how. Others have been given indication about priority. So just being told that their facility will be the last on campus to open if things go to plan, which is good info to know as we make decisions about how we will phase our reopening. Trevor from Wisconsin mentioned waiting direction from campus again, so kind of being up in the air, but noting that there will probably be limitations once we do start receiving and scheduling events, which makes sense. And I think we're all being given direction from a lot of different sources, whether that's from different associations with recommendations about how to reopen gym and recreation facilities, which there are a lot of good resources on the NIRSA forum for that, but also local ordinances and recommendations all the way down. And our universities might also be determining some criteria for reopening too. So I know that's a lot of source for a lot of folks as they plan their phases. Trying to catch up, lots of content here. So if anyone wants to jump in and talk through, that's totally cool too.
Are you Play-Dohing? All right, let me help you.
Amanda Simmons from VCU, not currently taking requests for space. Okay. So kind of holding off and hoping that we have more information at a certain date. Great. Yep, and then other folks are just mentioning, keeping in mind that once we do, so this is kind of a first phase of reopening with special events, is limiting capacity, number of attendees at special events in order to ensure social distancing appropriately, or closing certain areas. Julia Neal from University of Akron brings up discussion of using courts for classroom space so that proper social distancing in a large space can happen. So Julia, is that discussion from the academic side of the university potentially turning to your facilities to use your court space for academic classes?
Correct. We are currently have had some reach out on that because they would like to have a blended looking fall semester where there is some on-campus class as well as, the typical online that's been going on. So looking for larger spaces where they can host that amount of bodies, automatically move to some court space that we have. It is not finalized in any way. If anyone has court space similar, the acoustics are pretty rough, but spacing wise, that would allow students to take classes in a much larger capacity than they would in typical classrooms.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I've not even thought of that. So I wonder if that'll be a trend for our academic colleagues to turn to us. And then that brings up a whole set of new limitations on how we could reopen to serve, again, both open rec participants or host various events. Definitely interesting. Cool.
Sarah made a good point that they're also doing the same thing. And questions about, how will that be cleaned in between classes? The acoustics.
Yeah, so I remember in the beginning, a lot of questions were around how will, not only student staffing models change, but cleaning procedures. So how will those cleaning procedures or policies, maybe social distancing requirements or capacity limits, how are those affecting special events for when we do reopen for everyone? I know that was a big question that folks were asking about. Will masks be required? Will we just be following local rules or ordinances? How's that look?
Hi, this is Davida from FAU. So cleaning procedures, what we're planning on, we've developed our phases as far as opening goes. For phase 1, we're not going to allow for any special events to check out any equipment. We're going to suggest that they use masks, but we're not going to be on the field making sure they're wearing those masks. We're just going to make it a request for their safety. In phase 2, the same, we won't be checking out any equipment. And then in phase 3, when we go to semi-normal, that's when the equipment will be able to check out, and that's when we'll be sanitizing those equipments. That's what we've been talking about so far as special events.
Great, thank you, Davida. Any other unique protocols or plans around proper sanitation or spacing?
One question I have about the, like if you have academic classes in your spaces, like let's say you can only have 50 people in your whole facility, you know, is that going to affect the participation of maybe like the weight room or cardio areas if you are using the courts? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, so this is Julia again from the University of Akron. We have definitely chatted about that because we have two, if anyone noticed, two separate court spaces, a 3-court and a 2-court gym. We had hoped to use the 2-court gym to expand our fitness floor to just sort of allow more spacing between equipment, but also the possibility of having one space open one day, disinfected that night really thoroughly, and the other space opened the second day. But if they take our space for classrooms, which academics does have that right, we won't be able to do that as well. So lots of interesting discussion around everything, but nothing figured out or ironed out.
Thank you.
Great. A relevant question that was brought up in the beginning was around the disinfecting and cleaning procedures. So how are different folks supplementing the work of facilities or custodial support if we have that, whether it's in-house or contracted out, you know, with the need to maybe be more diligent with more frequent cleaning? How are different folks supplementing that? You know, are we kind of adding new duties and responsibilities to some of the student supervisors who are working in the spaces? It seems to be a new challenge to have that much more attention placed on cleaning. How's everyone tackling that? I know I was previously at University of Florida, just left a few weeks ago before moving to California, and I know there we were really relying on adding more frequent tasks in Connect 2, which is what we use to manage our operations, but adding more frequent tasks for students to specifically clean certain surfaces. So that was towards the end before we closed. So I would imagine that a similar approach will be important as we go forward, both with regular operations, but especially as it relates to special events. You know, if we are renting out equipment, it'll be important that we're somehow disinfecting that equipment before it gets returned and checked out to another group. Ross mentioned, thank you, Ross, for all your contributions. Students will help pick up additional cleanings with our third-party contractor, increasing day porter coverage. And Jackie mentioned more student staff being hired to assist with that. Okay. Awesome.
So one thing that we have on here, it's actually the last bullet that I would love to hear what you guys are doing, is about the contracts and cancellations. Not in relation to COVID-19, but more just in general. When we do return to normal, what kind of things you guys use those contracts for? And like, let's say a group cancels a day prior, you know, is there a charge that comes with that? This question was brought up a lot in the chat, but definitely something that we're looking at as well. So would love to hear from you guys on those.
Ashley Miller again, University of Minnesota. We have a cancellation policy right now that goes out about 2 weeks prior to the event. So if it's 14 to 7 days prior to the event, we charge 25%. If it's less than 7, it's 100%. I started my position about 1.5 years ago, and I've been wanting to slowly change that. I just didn't want to like rock the system too hard right away for people. I came from, I have a campus rec background, but was previously at a student union where we had a cancellation policy that went out a month that gradually increased. And I think the difference with our facility as a campus rec institute, as a campus rec department, is that if we don't have something booked, then our students get to use it as just open rec space. So I definitely have like a different philosophy there. But we do adhere to our cancellation policy. All external groups have to do a contract that is provided by the university that we just fill in details for. But student groups, departments, we don't have them sign a contract. We just send them a confirmation form through EMS that has our cancellation policy listed out. With COVID, we're not charging any cancellation fees. Even if people want to rebook during quote normal times, we don't charge cancellations either, just because we'd rather have their business than charge them a couple bucks just to cancel that.
Lots of good content coming through the chat. At UT Austin, no cancellation fee for events that decide to cancel, no matter the time window, as long as they provide that notice. However, they might incur costs with other agencies that they've contracted with, whether it be custodial or fire services or events and moving services, those groups. So it sounds like they're individually being secured by the client group, so they might incur a charge by canceling. Different conversation for a no-show by a campus department, makes sense. Carrie Miller talked about citing the force majeure clause right now and waiving any usual cancellation fees, taking tentative requests for fall and next year and placing holds, but not sending out any contracts for signature at this time. 1 week cancellation policy at UW-Madison. Less than a week, they might pay staffing charges and potentially facility charges. Great. Yeah, lots of different methods there, all in the chat. Cool. Katie, any more on contracts and cancellations?
Yeah, I'm reading the chat right now. All really good. I'm definitely gonna have to go back and like look really into it and save these notes for later, because that's something that we're definitely looking into at UF currently.
So we have about 9 minutes, and there are a couple topics on the screen that we didn't get to, but I think it would be nice to open up the floor and let anyone jump in with any question or discussion point that you want to pose to the group, keeping in mind that we do have 9 minutes, so we might only get through 1 or 2 of these. But if anyone is interested in that, feel free to jump in.
I can jump in and ask a question. For events, nothing having to do with COVID-19, but tournaments with like high contact sports, let's say like football, basketball, soccer tournaments, do you require events to have officials for those? And then also, if you do require them, are they your student officials, or are they required to get them from elsewhere? If anyone has any.
So at UT Austin, we don't require them to have officials if it's a student organization event, that kind of stuff. We offer them the opportunity to use intramural officials, but they would have to write basically what amounts to an advertisement, like a call for staffing. And then we would submit that to the listserv that the intramural department has. So if their officials are looking for additional hours, they can pick them up by contacting that group directly. We do have a meeting with each group that has an event, and in that meeting, if Like if it's an event like full contact, like let's say soccer or flag football, we do highly encourage them to also have athletic trainers on site. And we have a partnership with a local physical therapy team, and they cover a lot of those events.
Cynthia, to answer your question, neither intramurals or club sports. We're talking at University of Florida, those are handled differently, and those do require officials and all that. But for events that are like a student group wanting to hold a philanthropy flag football tournament that we deem as a high impact, could cause like injuries or fights. So we have typically required officials to be present at the events to kind of make sure that as a risk management tactic. So if any like external, either student orgs or external groups. So Sarah said that they request them.
Is there anyone that does require officials for certain events? For example, if someone's having a flag football tournament, maybe it's a student organization hosting a philanthropy tournament, anything like that where anyone does require officials. Okay, interesting. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I will add that we wouldn't acquire an official, but a facility, an event supervisor would have to be out there for that event if it was high impact.
That's a good distinction too, because, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that doesn't mean that they're just out there unsupervised, potentially on an outdoor field. So for those who don't require officials, it sounds like maybe having an event supervisor out there is the alternative protocol. Very good point. Okay. Another good question was from Margie Rogers at CU Boulder. Is anyone reconsidering how food is handled at events? I will say, at some institutions, we have the Office of Student Organizations and Events oversees that, and they require that any food provided meets certain criteria, such as being individually wrapped and provided by a catering service that the university has pre-approved and is on a certain catering or approved list. But it does bring a good question, does that even get reconsidered after COVID-19? So Carrie Miller mentioned no buffet style offerings, all prepackaged in boxes or bags. Yep. Scott mentioned contracting with the third-party food vendor. Food waiver through the memorial unions at KU. Yeah, it's probably one of those things that'll be looked at closely, which makes sense. Okay. And then one other question was about fall events. Is anyone doing any sort of virtual fall back to school event, or maybe accommodating how that event looks to permit in person, but while still following proper social distancing measures? I know here at San Francisco State, that'll definitely depend on what the fall semester looks like academically, whether students will be, coming back to campus for classes or staying virtual for classes. That will definitely impact how we approach any sort of kickoff event, noting that some students might be staying home to do school virtually and not come back to the city. So that'll definitely play a role in that approach.
Yeah, I know at University of Florida, we're also talking about our coming back event that we always host, and we're brainstorming some ways that maybe we can, make that partially online or have people sign up to come in waves, but nothing solidified for that yet. We're just at the very beginning of the brainstorming of that.
Awesome. Yeah, good stuff from Trevor at UW-Madison. Definitely very unlikely for large attendance events to take place, which makes sense, but could potentially host some socially distant trainings, staff trainings. So building out some designs on social tables, great planning. Yeah, I feel like everything evolves so quickly that we'll know a lot more in 3 weeks than we do now, and put us all in a much better position to think about fall. Great.
One quick thing that I saw, someone had mentioned about contact sports, so like basketball and allowing those in the facility. Has anyone made any decisions on whether those sports would be allowed? Sarah said not allowed as it currently stands.
Hey, Scott Vakulik here from Sam Houston. Yeah, as of right now, we're talking that we might have a goal or 2 goals lowered. And if someone happens to bring in their own basketball, then they can play horse with themselves, or maybe with 1 or 2 other people that have their own equipment. But we're not planning on renting out any equipment at this time. Same thing would probably go for like a badminton or even a pickleball. We would require people to clean their equipment and themselves properly before playing, and then properly clean afterwards. We're trying to, for the the student with the rec fee, we're trying to provide as many safe options as possible. So that's kind of what we're looking at, but there's going to have to be a lot of self-policing with that as well, and hopefully a lot of understanding. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of flack, but we're going to do what we can do for right now.
Scott, do you win and lose that game of knockout all at the same time then?
It's actually the one time I win, so go me. Hey, Ross, anytime you want to go for a game, let me know. We can set up a Zoom session for that.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, we are at 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., wherever you are. So thank you all for being here. I hope this was useful and engaging. If there is interest in hosting a roundtable number 2 on event services, Katie, if you want to flip to our email slides, feel free to reach out to us and share some topics that you'd want to discuss. And we can work with NIRSA, because I believe they're extending the window during which all of these roundtables will take place into the summer. So if we want to do event services round 2, send in some topics, and either we'll facilitate or recommend some others to facilitate another session. And Aaron brings up a good point, maybe waiting until there's more decisions so that in 3 or 4 weeks we have more solid info to work with as we implement some protocols around event services. So thank you all for being here. Happy Monday, and we will see you around.
Thank you so much.